Kimberly Hill this morning, back in the pulpit here at Legacy Church.
Thanks. Love you. Awesome. Whoa. Okay, it's been a minute. There we go. Am I on? Yeah. Oh, yeah, I can hear it. So it's such an incredible privilege to be here this morning. I am so excited. I'm a little amped, and I don't even drink caffeine anymore, so it's just all me. It's just all natural. Super amped, super excited to be here. I have never, ever, taken the opportunity to stand behind a pulpit or on a platform or any place of influence. Never taken that for granted, but I have to say it's that much more sweet today. It feels like a full circle moment. Pastor Doug called me last night to pray with me and asked how I was feeling, and I was trying to articulate that, and I couldn't really get the words out, but it feels like such a full circle moment to be here this morning, and extra sweet to be standing here healthy and whole and completely healed, and you're going to get to hear more about that. But it's just such a privilege to be here this morning. Like he said, we waited for what we felt like would be the perfect timing. It's been a couple months that I've been starting to feel good, and we waited for the perfect time. And I really do think it's such an honor and such the perfect time to start this series that he just described on awe, but also the month of December. It is a season. It is my favorite time of year. I'm the person that owns the elf shirt that says "Cray Cray for Christmas." I'm that person, and I truly am. I decorated the second week of November. My family will tell you and attest to that, just because I was ready to embrace this season. And I just feel like all of us have had a year. It's not just me. I know we've all had a year, and we need something and someone to be in awe of. And so I'm just grateful for this time. I think this is a word in due season. This series is perfectly timed. And so I'm just going to dive right in this morning. I hope you're taking notes, not because I have something so great to say, but because God has some great things to say and to stir and challenge us today. And our pastor always teaches us that note takers are history makers. And so I want to welcome Legacy at home as well. I'm just grateful that you guys are here with us. And so I want to start off by reading this quote that I just think perfectly encapsulates this series, Awe. And it is from C.S. Lewis, who wrote in Mere Christianity. He wrote, "Human beings are hardwired for awe. We are worshipers. We are searching for joy, hope, and fulfillment. This longing is deep in the heart of every human being. It wanders around in your soul. Your heart cries out every day to be enveloped by the glory of God. And whether we know it or not, that desire to be amazed, to be moved and satisfied is actually a universal craving to see God face to face." I love that so much. It is such a perfect, like I said, encapsulation of this series, Awe. We aren't meant to be swept up in the cynicism and the disillusionment and the skepticism that is all around us. We'd all agree that is what is all around us. That is the world around us, but we are in the world, not of it. We're not meant to be swept up in that. We are created to be enveloped by the glory of God. I love that. We are created to be enveloped by the glory of God. Human beings are hardwired for awe. I love that. We are hardwired. It is in our spiritual DNA to live in awe of the one who created us. So what is awe, really? I'm that nerd person. I'm just like Pastor Doug. My nephew right there will attest to that. This week he told me that I said the nerdiest word sentence he had ever heard in his life. That's me paraphrasing what he said. But I like words, and so the definition of awe is a feeling of reverential respect mixed with fear, like the holy fear, and wonder. And there's a song actually called Wonder, and there are lyrics in that just describe awe perfectly. It says, "May we never lose our wonder, wide-eyed and mystified. May we be just like a child staring at the beauty of our King." To me, that's such a perfect picture of awe, wide-eyed, like totally jaw dropped. I said to Pastor Doug last night, I said God smacked. I realized this morning I could not find the right word. It's gobsmacked. But then I was like, you know what? God smacked kind of works too, because, there are just some times when it's like, he's just like, not in a bad way, but he's like, hello, that's me. At least maybe that's how he does to me. But gobsmacked, jaw dropped, staring in amazement at his beauty, his majesty, his splendor, his greatness, his goodness, his bigness. If awe was an emoji in 2020, awe would definitely be this emoji right there, right? Just that. I believe Donna is watching Legacy at Home, is with us, Legacy at Home. She's been traveling, and oftentimes Donna and I text back and forth, just sharing and talking about what God is doing. And sometimes there are no words, and so we will come up with every mind-blown emoji or GIF, however you say it, that there is. And so it's always just like that. Like there's no other words to say, but like he just blew my mind. I know he blows my mind too. And so that's the perfect emoji for awe. David put it this way in Psalms 27:4. He says, one thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all my days, all the days of my life. And he's like, I don't want to just chill out on my couch. Again, paraphrasing. That's not any version you're going to find. It's like, I don't want to just chill out on the couch of God, but here's the purpose. I want to gaze on his beauty and seek him in his temple. This one thing I seek. I want to gaze at his beauty. I love the Passion translation of that same verse. It says, here's the one thing that I crave from God, the one thing I seek above all else. I want the privilege of living with him every moment in his house, finding the sweet loveliness of his face, to be filled with awe, delighting in his glory and grace. And this is what we have to understand, is that our gaze is an essential component to living in awe. Our gaze is an essential component to living in awe. We're here to learn to live in awe. Our gaze is an essential component to living in awe. Who and what we place our focus on determines who gets our attention and who gets our affection, who gets our adoration. Does that make sense? And y'all can feel free to talk back to me. It makes me feel not so solo up here, so feel free to interact. And I just echo what Pastor Doug said. My prayer for us during this season and this series is that we would be so completely just completely captivated and thrilled by Emmanuel. That's my absolute, God's got a lot of names in Scripture, and it's like, how do you pick your favorite? Emmanuel has always been my favorite since I learned what it meant, that it means God with us. My prayer is that we would just have a revelation of the withness of God, that we'd be so captivated by the fact that God came to earth to be with us, that he's not distant, he's not indifferent, that he's with us. To me, that's like mic drop, that leaves me in awe, that he is with us, that he intentionally came to be with us. And I'm praying for that revelation, that the eyes of our heart would just be illuminated with that truth, that we'd be like, oh my goodness, he's with me. He's with me. And we sing it and we say it, but I pray it just like explode in our heart. God is with me. He's not distant. He's not indifferent. He's near. I read this quote on Facebook the other day. It says, we may not know why God doesn't stop all of the different kinds of suffering, but we definitely know it's not because he's indifferent. Indifferent is like, he's not like, shrugging his shoulders. It's not because he's indifferent. God is so moved by our being entangled in suffering that he moved himself into our world and entangled himself in the suffering with us. God is with us. And if there is something that I learned in a fresh, new revelation kind of way in this past year, it was the withness of God. Not a real word, but it is now. I make up words all the time too. That's just something you just got to work with me. I learned of the withness of God in a new and fresh way. And like you said, some of you know my story, some of you don't. And so I want to share this morning some of the details because I want you to see the witness of God in the midst of circumstances that others from the outside could say, where was God? but I had a front row seat. I'll tell you where God was, and that's what I get to do today, is to tell you where God was. And so it started for me October 23rd. It's one of those, you know how you have those dates in your life, and it's like separates before and after. October 23rd, 2019, so a year and a couple months ago, and I was busy getting ready for our weekly staff meeting and like ready to head out the door, and all of a sudden I noticed some very tiny but unfortunately familiar blisters right here on my chest. And it was like I just dropped my stuff, called Pastor Doug. I was like, I got to head to the ER. I'm pretty sure that I have shingles again. I had them about a year before that, and they manifested in the same place, and then kind of doing some calculations. Oh, yeah, I didn't kind of feel good the week before, and so headed to the ER, and just a short time later, my suspicion was confirmed, and the doctor sent me home, and this time I was like, okay, I kind of know what to expect. I mean, you should never have to expect, but I was like, okay, and got what I needed at the store, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go hunker down for the 5 to 6 weeks that I assume is going to take to recover. That's kind of what it was before and kind of the average. And so headed home, it stinks, but it's like, all right, suck it up. Like, I'm also the person that owns the shirt that says, suck it up, Buttercup. So I was just like, all right, got to do this, got to do it. And so within 24 hours of that, going home, this virus just began to like wreak havoc. There's no other way, and I'm not like trying to be melodramatic this morning. If anything, I'll tend to downplay, but it just began to wreak havoc on my body. There's no other way to say it. And normal shingles stays on one side of the body. It follows your nerve ending, your nerve path. Thank you. All these words. Yes, thank you for that right there. That's what they were following. But all of a sudden, it went across my chest, across the midline is what they call it, and then up my face. And so broke out on this side of my face and ended up in the ER again 2 days later. I think that's when Dolores came and picked me up. At one point, they came and picked me up at the hospital. I thought I was going to drive, but they had just given me some morphine. And so it was a good reason not to be driving. But I ended up in the ER again. I had been told enough to know that if shingles goes into your eye, it can actually cause brain inflammation and death. So I had been warned, if it goes anywhere near your eye, you have to come back in. And all of a sudden, my eye was like bloodshot and red, and I had blisters right here. So I go in, and I end up not having shingles in my eye, but on the side of my eye, and it caused some inflammation and on my eyeball. And so went back home, and this was in that 5 to 6 weeks, and I was, all right, I'm praying, I'm believing for a speedy recovery. And on November 18th, which I know the dates mean nothing to you, but it helps me to kind of know the timeline. So less than 4 weeks after that first initial breakout, I began to blister across my face. So it went across here and across the top of my forehead. And if you saw me during that time, I looked like a mummy, but you probably didn't, because I didn't really want people to see me. But I went back to the doctor again. I was like frequent flyer in the ER and at my doctor's, and he confirmed a rare second case of shingles. It wasn't the first one continued. It was a second case of shingles, which is very rare. But those blisters over the next few days just spread across my face into my mouth, which not fun. Just not fun. And then up and down both my arms. So it's just like going crazy. It just seems to have no pattern, which it didn't. And just blisters on top of blisters on my arms. And then I really looked like a mummy. And with this and another occurrence just a few weeks after that, my personal doctor finally diagnosed me with chronic disseminated shingles, meaning disseminated all over, meaning this is not doing what normal shingles is supposed to do, and then chronic, meaning incurable shingles. The best that they tell you can hope for with shingles is that it goes back, it just remains dormant, and that you're kind of in remission, and you just kind of hope that it'll never come back, and you just live like hoping that you never anger the nerve endings or whatever. And so within just a few short weeks, I went from really, like, thinking back, like feeling the happiest, strongest, most energetic of my life, like it was just one of those seasons, to absolutely feeling like Baymax. I think it's Big Hero 6, where like he just like zero energy. And I am like a go, burn the candle at both ends kind of person, like. And I just had zero energy, just an extreme fatigue that I can't even really articulate, and just pain and like zero energy, where it was like, honestly, some days it was nearly impossible just to get out of bed to make it to the bathroom, which is only a few steps from my bedroom in my apartment, and in that season, sometimes going days, and again, not an exaggeration, the most I remember is 4 days without sleep. Like 15 minutes total. Like I would clock like, oh, I got a 2-minute nap, where the drugs knocked me out long enough. But just the pain and like the severe nerve endings just like keeping me awake. And it's a virus of the nervous system. So I would feel like that feeling you get when you're almost in an accident and your adrenaline just hits, like constantly, that level of anxiety for no reason, and then pain just keeping me awake. They actually have a term for it. They call it painsomnia. Like, I mean, it works, but it's brutal to experience. And also just battled ongoing fevers and feeling like frozen like a popsicle. I've went through, I think, 5 now electric blankets. I look at you because you're one of the people that brought me an electric blanket at some point. 5 electric blankets, like just like burning them out to stay warm. Body aches and then skin sensitivity, where it's like even just talking about it, my hair's just stood up. Like where sometimes where fabric touching your skin was just like, you can't take it, and would just have you in tears. And I like to think I'm a pretty tough cookie, but we all have our pain tolerance. And for me, it was like the stuff in my face. The nerves affected in my face caused like ringing in my ears, and so that's just like, you've got picture like the insomnia, and then the anxiety, and then a ringing in your ears, and caused nerve pain in here, and like earache pain, and then toothache pain through my teeth. But by far the hardest pain to tolerate, and again, I'm not like, oh, here's my sad story, but again, I want to paint the backdrop that you're going to see against that, the glory and the goodness of God. And so the hardest part by far was just the pain and the itch of the nonstop blistering on my arms, because the blisters, they'd blister, and then they'd like kind of heal, and the blisters would blister on top of the blisters over and over and over. And at times it was so bad that I would hold my arms under scalding hot water and scrape at them with a toothbrush, a clean toothbrush, but scrape at them with a toothbrush, which like provided like momentary, temporary like relief, and then like instant regret, because I knew that's just going to make it worse. But like for that 1 second, it was like, if I can get 30 seconds of relief, it's worth it. And so that's kind of the picture of that. And despite connecting during this time, I connected with a couple different shingles groups on Facebook. Although I did jokingly say I was going to start my own singles with shingles, but that never came to fruition. But I did connect with a couple different shingles groups, support groups, and I would hear their stories, and some of these people with the exact same diagnosis had been suffering for decades. And I was like, oh my Lord, I can't think of the next 30 seconds. I cannot imagine the next 30 years. And so despite knowing we have the same diagnosis, I continued to believe for a miraculous end of shingles, and believed it every single time there'd be a recession or a healing of the breakout. I just believed that would be the end. But for 11, mostly quarantine, that's why you did not see my face, and some of you thought I was brand new to the church just a couple months ago, which is awesome and fine. It's been great to get to know you. But for mostly 11 quarantine months, that remained a part of my story. And it is a part that I would not wish on my worst enemy ever, ever, ever. But also, and I'm telling you the God's honest truth, I would not edit it out of my story either if I was given the chance. And now you probably either think I'm completely insane, but I say that with sincerity because I know the author of my story, and I trust the author of my story, and I came to know him even in a greater, deeper way, and I witnessed against the backdrop of really utter agony. Against that backdrop, I witnessed and experienced like the highlighted goodness of God in ways that have forever transformed me, have forever marked me, forever, forever, forever. So I would not say I would like to go through that again. I'm not an idiot, but I would not edit it out of my story. And I truly believe that one of the reasons why I saw the goodness of God in the midst of a situation that didn't look good, that's why I painted the real picture for you. It didn't look good. It definitely didn't feel good. But the reason I saw his goodness in it is because I was looking for it. That's the difference. I was looking for it. I purposed and planned, and I'm very tenacious. Some might say stubborn in a good way. Hopefully God has learned to aim that stubbornness in a good way. But I purposed to keep my eyes fixed on him. I purposed to, because it's like, where else am I going to go? Like, what else am I going to do in this situation but keep my eyes fixed on him? We like to say in freedom, come hell or high water, I determine my eyes are going to remain fixed on you. David had the same resolve when he declared in Psalms 27:13, I will remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living, not just in the sweet by and by. Like that's a promise. In the sweet by and by, we're going to see the goodness of the Lord. But he says, in the land of the living, I will see the goodness of the Lord. And that verse speaks two things to me today to share. To share with you. I will see the goodness of the Lord, meaning that his revealed goodness is a promise that we can cling to. The fact that his goodness is going to be revealed, we sang about that, we talked about that this morning, is a promise we can cling to. We can trust that he works all things together for good for those that love him and are called according to his purpose. That's not some cliche or nice little Christian bumper sticker. That is his word. That is his promise to us. So we can trust that. We can trust that his goodness and his mercy follow us all the days of our life. All. That means this day, today, his goodness is like tracking us down. His goodness is stalking us night and day. Genesis 50:20 says we can trust that what the enemy means for evil, and rest assured, his only plan for us is evil. Steal, kill, destroy. But what he means for evil, God will take and use it for good. That is his promise. That is his promise. And that alone should leave us in awe. That's like, oh my goodness, he's with us, and then he's for us. And then the other way that this verse can be read is as a determined choice. I will see. That's where the tenacity comes in. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. I will see his goodness because I will live looking for it. I will fix my eyes. My gaze will be fixed. I will see his goodness. I will live in wide-eyed wonder and amazement because he's worthy of my full attention. Not just my Sunday morning attention, but my full attention Sunday through Saturday, 24/7, worthy of my full attention and all my adoration. I'm going to see his goodness. I'm going to see his goodness. And I'm not saying that this is easy. Again, I'm not trying to paint some great picture. There are many in this room who can attest to very low and dark and traumatic moments that I endured this past year. You can attest to it because I can't do this alone. And so you got calls and you got texts, and some of the calls, I remember sobbing on the phone to Cynthia. I don't know that I said a coherent word in one of our conversations, but she just let me weep. And she's just one of many that was just the messy reality in some of it, just to be honest. And so again, I don't want today to be like, oh, let's applaud how strong she was. I know how strong I am, and my strength ended about October 25th, but his strength was made perfect in my weakness. And so I want us to see and stand in awe of his strength And again, it was a violent attack. Shingles wasn't just a physical attack. It was a violent, all-out attack, demonic attack on every single aspect of my life. Brutal mind games that just caused this emotional roller coaster, combined with the not sleeping and the anxiety and just the pain and all of that. There's this combo, and in that, just the emotional roller coaster, just this overwhelming fear that I was going to lose vital relationships. And I would see that on these groups, like people just losing their loved ones because to be so needy in a relationship and to need so much. And then I was so isolated. I feared losing those vital relationships and then missing out on many major events, including my family is here today, including a family trip to Disney World that I know God is going to restore one day somehow. But many major life events, and it just made me feel like life is passing me by. I felt like everybody was going forward with the year, even with the year that we were having, and I was back there somewhere, and that left me feeling hopeless at times. Feeling hopeless, talking about the feels and the emotions. I would choose to hope, but I felt hopeless at times. I felt like life as I knew it was over. Like right before this, it felt like all the pieces were like coming all together, and it's like, and then all of a sudden the pieces just like, and at times it felt like I was going to be one of those people on the support group chronically ill for years. Like I hoped and I prayed and I believed different, but there were times that it felt like, okay, well, I'm not seeing any evidence of healing. I'm not seeing any evidence. And I wondered, because maybe y'all don't do this, but I wondered, like, is there something in my life I'm being punished for? Like, I thought I repented. Like, you're having freedom at home all by yourself again. And you're just like, God, if there's anything, like, search me. Show me if there be any wicked ways in me. And then just the other mind game was assuming that people thought that there was something in my life, that there was some hidden sin in my life. And so all of that going on. And I never once was angry at God. I was angry. Just hear that. I was never angry at God, which kept us in a great place. I was angry at myself because I couldn't get healed. I couldn't suck it up, buttercup. I couldn't make myself feel better. I couldn't pray hard enough. I couldn't fast long enough. It just didn't seem like I could do enough. I didn't have enough faith. And those mind games were just relentless. And admittedly, like in some of the darkest times, admittedly, just going to sleep and not waking up in pain seemed like just a welcome relief, kind of like scraping the sores, like just temporary relief. Not that I'm not saying I wanted to die, I just did not want to live like that. But I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. That kept me pointed true north. It really, really, really did. I'm a word person, and so the word just comes alive, and it just kept me like focused, kind of like blinders on a racehorse, just like kept me focused, kept my gaze. I will see it. I will see it. Not because, again, that his goodness is always blatantly evident, but because I choose to live looking for it, and I've learned to detect his goodness, his activity. I've learned to detect it and acknowledge it when I see it. And the more determined to see his goodness, the more I saw. The more determined I was to see his goodness, the more of his goodness I saw. So it's not always easy to see the goodness of God when you're surrounded by stuff that doesn't look good and doesn't feel good, right? I mean, if we're just being honest, it's not always easy. But I do believe that a key to learning to live in awe of God is simply choosing to. So much of our walk is simply choice. Simply choosing to. Get that? It isn't hard to see the evidence of God's goodness, his power, his presence, his witness when we're actively and intentionally looking for it. It's not hard to see it when we're looking for it. That's the hard part, is training ourselves to look for his goodness when everything around us doesn't look good or feel good, right? But when we predetermine, that means I'm making a choice now in the next moment, come what may, that God's going to get the glory in my story. Whatever the story looks like, whatever it is, whatever your will, God, you've taught me to say, it is well. It is well with my soul. You're going to get the glory in my story. When we predetermine that that's our attitude, that's going to be the position of our heart, it's astonishing how blaringly obvious then his goodness becomes to us. You begin to see like, oh my goodness, you are good, and you're always good, and your plans are always good. And if it's not good right now, it's not done. It's not over. If it's not good right now, it's not over, because you said you work all things together for good. And honestly, God, I mean, it was like, it's his specialty to astonish us and to leave us in awe. And he was like, challenge accepted. I've got 11 months, just you and me, and I'm going to astonish you. And he astonished me in the ways that he showed up for me. And no, he didn't instantaneously heal me or rescue me from the ordeal. He didn't take me out of it, but he sure enough was in it right with me. He was with me. He was Emmanuel, God with me. And he astonished me by the ways that he showed up for me and provided for me and sustained me. And in that, it was no less miraculous than if he had instantaneously healed me. It was just as miraculous. And with this opportunity, I'd be amiss to stand here and not take the opportunity to also acknowledge how I saw God, his goodness, in one of the most profound ways, and that was through the way that he loved me through so many of you. And so to stand here is just like, I have to. She's down here. I was like, okay, I've went through this message many times, and I've made it without like snot running down my face. I can't promise anything right now, but the way he loved me through y'all and many of you at home and others, it was and is astonishing, and it has changed me forever. And I don't have time to recount the texts, every single one of them that I've kept, and the calls and the messages and the blessings and the balloons and the cards and the stuff that I received during that time, and how people in this room assured me, we will get through this. Not you're going to get through this, like, go ahead, but we will get through this. And then backed it up, showing up in ways that I'll never be able to repay. Like, I wrote stuff down. I'm a note taker, and I will take notes of everything that God has done and everything that y'all have done. But I would sit there and go, God, I'll never be able to repay this. I'll never be able to pay back all of this. And that right there, when we just think about that for a second, we'll never be able to repay everything he does. That ought to leave us in awe. It's not about repaying. It isn't about repaying. It was about, in this season, receiving his love. And people prayed. And I would send out texts to pray, but I knew those people were praying. It wasn't like, oh, please pray. I knew they were praying, but I'd say, here, pray for this. And then I find out people are fasting. Like, it's one thing to pray for people, and it's another thing to pray and fast for people. Like, that just, again, it just wrecked me in so many ways. And y'all just would show up in such incredible ways, refusing to give up on me, refusing to just be like, hey, stinks to be you. But y'all would like show up at my door to brighten my day, and knowing you can't come in, you can't even have contact, but you'd show up at my door, drop stuff off, walk my dog, keep my dog for weeks, even when he was a jerk and trying to escape, keep my dog, pick up groceries, drop stuff off. I have right here a ninja. She was the only person, Dawnese, that could drop stuff off at the door and the dog wouldn't bark. I don't know how she'd do it, but she'd say, I left something at the door, and the ninja struck again. And probably it was boxes of itch cream, because many of you bought me multiple boxes of itch cream. Like, how much do you want me to get when you're at the store? Just clear the shelf. Like, for real, right? For real. Like, just give me what they have. I should have bought stock in that stuff, man. But I don't want it anymore. I want nothing to do with it. Took care of my vehicle. Mr. Jerry and many of you contributed putting tires on my car when I wasn't even driving it, but to make sure when I was ready to drive it, it would be ready for me. A bunch of you came and brought Christmas cheer to me, knowing how much Christmas means to me, and caroled outside my apartment, had a patio birthday for me. My bedside literally was just like completely plastered with just reminders of how this would not be the end of my story and how much I was loved. And that is another reason I have to just plug this. Everything I just said about y'all and about just being loved through seeing God's goodness through his people. That's why you get connected. That's why I'm always like, we're better together. I could not have gone through that alone. Like, you know your limits, and I knew I could not have gone through that alone. And because I'm connected here, because this isn't just like a church, it's my family, I didn't have to. And that's so huge to me. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm trying to make eye contact with every single person as quick as I can. And thank you for really. Thank you for being like living, breathing evidences of God's relentless and historic faithfulness to me. For real, for real, for real. Every single thing mattered more than I could ever articulate, and especially in this time. But his historic faithfulness was exactly what God was reminding me of just a few months ago when I came across this verse in the Message Bible that just shifted everything for me. It just galvanized really my resolve to make it through the season, and not just to make it through. I didn't want to just be a survivor. I always say I didn't come this far to only come this far. I didn't want to just survive. I want to come out thriving, because that is what God has called us to do, is to come out of our seasons thriving, completely healed, whole, restored in every single way. And when I read the scripture, it just galvanized my resolve to do so. It's Acts 2:25 and 26 in the Message version. It says, David said it all. I saw God before me for all time. Nothing can shake me. He's right by my side. I'm glad from the inside out. I'm ecstatic. I've pitched my tent in the land of hope. I've pitched my tent in the land of hope. And when I read that, I was like, I don't know that that's always been in that version or if God just put that in there for me, but that is mine. I'm taking it. I'm a visual person, so I made a little art thing. I plastered it in several different places because I'm a word person. I have to keep it before me. I keep my gaze on the word of God. And so I pitched my tent in the land of hope, just became this for me, like this just resolve, this galvanized resolve to pitch my tent, to stake my claim in the promises that God had for me. And that phrase reminded me of this scripture when it says about Abraham in Romans 4:18. For Abraham, when all human reason for hope being gone, hoped. All human reason for hope being gone, he hoped. That's either lunacy or you have anchored yourself in something that you know is beyond just the temporary and the seen, right? I've pitched my tent in the land of hope has become my daily declaration, again, as I staked my claim. And the more I refuse to be moved, guess what? The more the enemy refused to be moved at first, to be completely honest, because you think, oh, it's just going to change instantaneous. Nothing about this was instantaneous. But at that point, so this was about September, at that point, he and I both knew I was coming from a place of victory and that this was over and that he had already lost. And when I began to start feeling better, which had happened in these 11 months, I would start to feel better and then have that letdown of another breakout. And so I began to start feeling better, and God upped this challenge about staking my claim in the land of hope. He called me out on some underlying fear, that fear of, oh, I'm feeling better, but what if that again? What if I break out again? And God totally interrupted my anxious thoughts one morning, and he said, don't be cautiously optimistic. Be blatantly hopeful. I'm a word person. I love when God just puts, I know Jen does too, when he puts an adjective or an adverb on there. Don't be cautiously optimistic. Don't live like this, like, oh, well, I hope I keep feeling better. That's an underlying fear. But be blatantly hopeful. We've spent time before defining hope. Hope means the positive, optimistic expectation that good is coming. The positive, optimistic expectation that good is coming. That word blatantly means completely and conspicuously. Like, not like low-key hopeful, blatant, expectant, conspicuously, out in the open, hopeful. And I vowed in that moment to pitch my tent in the land of hope, and not only to do that, but to reject that timid, skeptical, fingers crossed kind of fear. And it taught me to catch myself, because sometimes you don't even know that that's the kind of faith you're operating in, or I didn't. Like, no, the nature of hope is that it is up. People say, don't get your hopes up. The nature of hope is that it is supposed to be up, right? Our hope is not in the outcome. It is in the God of the outcome. That's how we can live. That's how we can live in awe. And so not having that fingers crossed type of faith, but unapologetically, completely, conspicuously, blatantly hopeful. And that kind of hope is that wide-eyed, fully expecting to see the goodness of God. I'm fully expecting to see the goodness of God. And to live that way is to fully expect that He is true to His word. He says He's looking to show Himself strong. He's looking to intervene on our behalf, just as He promised. And hope like that really is only possible, comes back to our gaze, when our eyes are fixed on Him. Right? You don't get that kind of hope when your eyes are on the circumstances. I did not get that kind of hope looking at my diagnosis or my arms or my face in the mirror. That kind of hope only comes by keeping our gaze on the God who cannot lie, who cannot fail. And when we keep our eyes on Him, we can rest assured to know that His eyes are fixed right on us. His eyes are on us. He's watching over us. He is with us. He's never, ever, ever inactive. He is never, ever, ever indifferent. Ever, ever. And I get that in painful, difficult circumstances. I hope that you'll take it from me when I say I know that we can be tempted to ask why. And not having all those answers can be hard to accept. But living in awe of God also means that we surrender our need to demand all the answers. I'm not getting caught up in the why. I want to get caught up in this is going to sound super cheesy, but that's what just came to me. I want to get caught up in the wow, God, look at what you're doing. Look at who you are. Why is a question we often will not get our answers to on this side of eternity, or at least not sufficient answers. One time I was asking God, why? And He finally answered me. He said, if I answer you, you'll just turn around and ask me why again. And I was like, touche. Living in awe of God means we surrender that and we trust His timing and His ways and His plans, and to trust that His plans are good, and He plans to astonish us, absolutely astonish us. And if you needed to hear this morning, I'm like, I needed to hear this again. God, thank you. I'm grateful that I get to preach this, because I get to hear this again. If you need to hear this morning, I am thrilled to be the one, for real, that gets to be the living, thriving, healthy reminder of this today, because as of September 22nd, 76 days today, and you do count days when it has been 11 months, 76 days, I am shingles free. Come on. With confirming blood work that shows 0 trace markers of any virus in my system. 0 trace markers in my system. 0. Talk about the jaw-dropping goodness of God. Woo! It's my story, and I'm like, over and over. And I hope I always live that way. I want to always live that. I don't want to be so far removed from this testimony that I am not in awe of who God is and what He has done. And I've got that same blatant hope for us, for this family, for this church, for your family, and that God is about to, we always highlight the scripture, He's about to crown this year with goodness. I have that same blatant hope for all of us. It's been a year. If there's a year where we need to have Him crown this year with goodness, it's this year. If there's a year where we need to be able to see His goodness in the land of the living and to learn to live looking for it, it's this year. And I believe He is about to just stun us, show up in ways that are visible and tangible. And I don't necessarily mean with the naked eye, but that we'd have eyes that see that was God. That's God. That's God. That's God. The story that I'm living is God. And so whatever your particular circumstances or struggles or challenges, I want you to leave this place knowing that nothing is impossible for our awesome God. That's what I want you to hear from my story. That's what I want you to see now forever. When you look at my life, if you saw anything, I'd want you to see that nothing is impossible for God. That your jaw would drop. And I want us to be able to look in our own mirrors and because of our own story and our own life and the way we see God come through for us, we'd be able to look in the mirror every day and say, now I know nothing's impossible for God. Nothing. I know Jason's story, nothing's impossible for God, right? I know Paul's story, nothing's impossible for God. And on and on and on. Can you get a vision for that with me today? Legacy at home, if you can get a vision for that God will crown this year with goodness. I want you to type in the chat. I don't know why I did this. Like type in the chat or type in the chat, I see it. And that's the difference. Where we place our gaze determines our attention, our focus, our adoration. And maybe you can't see it right now. And that can be... It is okay to not be okay in this place. It is okay to be real. I cannot tell you that I always saw it. Again, there are people in this room that could attest. If I tried to stand up here and be like, I always saw it, and I just was so perfect in all this, they'd be like, how about this text and this phone call? So I'm not trying to pull the wool over. There are times where we can't see it. And that's why you better have some people that can see it for you and with you. Maybe you're like more that cautious optimism, and when you heard me talk about that, you're like, oh yeah, that's the kind of faith that I live with. It's more like, oh, well, I hope that the shoe doesn't drop, or like, I don't want to get my hopes up too high because disappointment stinks, and it does. But a hope fulfilled is a tree of life. To experience the hope fulfilled, that's awe-inspiring. That's jaw-dropping. But if that is you, if that's where you're at, I want to pray for you today, that God would just breathe fresh hope. And that's what I've been praying as I've been preparing. I kind of knew weeks ago, so I get a head start, and I've just been praying that God would breathe fresh hope on us, like he did for me that day when he gave me that word, when he gave me that scripture. And I want to challenge you like he challenged me. And actually, challenge it would be like a weaker word. I want to dare you to choose to be blatantly hopeful. And it is a choice. And it'll take catching yourself when you're more cautiously optimistic. But to be blatantly, conspicuously, and continuously hopeful, expecting that something good is about to happen. I dare you to fix your gaze on God. Maybe it's been a little bit distracted. It's been on your circumstances. It only takes less than a second to fix your gaze on God, to look for the evidence of his goodness all around you. I dare you to determine that you will see the goodness of God in the land of the living. You'll see the goodness of God in your home, in your family, in your marriage, in your workplace, in this church. I dare you, and I think that's going to be the dare of the next few weeks, to live in awe. And what's really cool is God reminded me this morning, like if you're not just feeling that awe, ask him. He's the God that we can say, I want to live in awe. I don't feel the awe. I may not see it, but ask him, God, I want to live in awe. Teach me to awe me, God. There's a prayer. 2 words, awe me. I want to pray for us right now. If you just bow your heads and close your eyes. I just want to pray that fresh hope on all of us today. I just declare fresh, blatant, conspicuous, continuous hope in this place, that we would be a people marked by hope. We would be a people, a house, a family marked by blatant hope. God, where there's been cautious optimism, fear, skepticism, cynicism, deflated, deferred hope, I just see you breathing fresh hope all over this place today. As we choose hope, as we choose to be blatantly hopeful, as we choose to place our gaze on you today. God, fix our eyes. I pray that you would just come and just lift. Your word says you're the lifter of our heads. And some in this room, your eyes have been on your circumstances, and it's like understandable. Nobody would fault you for that. But I just see God just coming and lifting your chin, just lifting your head. Lifting your head. Away from the circumstances, away from the situation, away from all there's just questioning. And you're getting in that place of reasoning and trying to figure it all out and you are literally driving yourself absolutely crazy trying to figure it all out. And I just see God just lifting your head. Be a child. Children stare like unapologetically. Right? They will stare. And they won't break away. They will stare at people out in public. Uncomfortably so. Be a child. Catch his gaze. Keep his gaze. Stare at him. And in that, I just declare we're going to see your goodness, God. We're going to see your goodness. It's promised to us, and we're going to learn to live looking for it and seeing it, God, being catchers of you, catching you in the act, catching you in the act. I just see us catching him in the act of being good and keeping his promise and showing himself strong on our behalf. The last thing is I want to dare us to pitch our tent in the land of hope. I dare you to pitch your tent in the land of hope. The good thing about it is there's plenty of room there. My tent doesn't take up all the room, and y'all can just stake your claim in that same place. Come hell or high water. Refuse to be moved from a place of hope, from a place of expectation and a place of awe. And just to remind us of this today, wanted to give you all a gift, to give you a token. And so they're going to pass that out right now to remind you to pitch your tent in the land of hope. And so these are sharp. That just comes with a little warning. So they are not for the children, just FYI. But I dare you to put it somewhere this week that will remind you to pitch your tent in the land of hope, to live hopeful, to live with that expectation that good is coming.